Hey y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. So this week we are going to talk about some bias busters, some things that you can do to try to eliminate some of those little micro biases, some of those little death by a thousand cuts things that might be getting in the way of your job search. Now, obviously, in a perfect world, we can eliminate bias altogether. AI is not going to do it, y'all, because guess what? Garbage in, garbage out. So the developers behind the scenes, the people inputting the requirements, all of that, bias can exist. So I don't want to hear it. If you're here to argue with me about how AI is going to solve it all, go away. This is not the video for you. Okay? Seriously. I've been annoyed enough in the last couple of weeks. I just flew back from the Midwest where it was 150 degrees. So don't do it. Okay. So all kidding aside, some of the weird little minor but annoying biases that we might see are things like company bias, compensation bias, tenure bias, location bias, things like that. These things exist. They just do. And it's our job as recruiting professionals to try to eliminate those or to try to eliminate any poor decision making based on those. But there's also some things that you as a job seeker can do, okay? I don't want you to lie on your resume. I don't want you to try to hide who you are, but I do want you to focus on providing the right insight and data to make sure that the recipient sees very clearly what a great fit for the job that you are, that gets you invited to an interview where you can also use that opportunity to showcase through your accomplishments and experiences why you're so great for this role. Okay, so let's dig in. Company bias. This might surprise some of you. I've worked in big tech for the last decade, as you all know. And when I shared my resume, I had a number of people tell me that they would see the companies on my resume and reject me. They would reject me for a role that I assume I'm otherwise qualified for because they don't like the company names on my resume. People have preconceived notions about what it means to be a recruiter at Fang, Mang, Manga, whatever we're calling it these days. I don't even know. People have preconceived notions about my abilities, strengths, superpowers, and skills because they recognize the company name on my resume. In fact, multiple people decided to insult me by claiming that I'm only as successful as I appear to be because of the big names on my resume. A common misconception. I digress. I'm not going to get into it because I want to get heated again. But the same thing happens with small companies, right? Like, I'm not trying to make this all about my petty ass privileged problems here, but the same thing happens with small companies. Sometimes there's some logic behind it. If we're talking about operating at a certain level, scope and scale, that kind of thing, I understand. Maybe you do need somebody who's dealt with terabytes of data or sold millions of dollars of software or equipment or whatever. So I understand that. There is sometimes going to be a scale concern. But for the most part, if you've recruited at a small company and you've had to be scrappy and use, free tools and all of those kinds of things, I think that actually makes you a great recruiter for any company. And you can adapt to larger companies that may have, different structures or different tools available to you, or maybe even just some policy stuff to navigate. But I think company size becomes irrelevant. It's all about what you did in that organization. Now, I will say this is where they may differ. If I'm hiring a recruiter who's going to make 500 offers a year and is going to do like massive, high volume, fungible, like maybe it's campus recruiting, or maybe it's, filling seats in a call center, 20 people every week or something like that, Like, I understand that, again, we are talking about a particular scale or scope of work, but you don't have to have worked for a big company to always meet that, right? So the goal here is to make the company name irrelevant and to make the actual accomplishments and what you delivered the relevant piece. So looking at the job description and understanding, like, okay, they want somebody that can operate at this level. Well, here's how I've done that. Show that to us through the accomplishments and the data points and the successes that you've had. Compensation bias is another one. I've had a lot of people tell me, I wouldn't call you because I've seen where you work and I can't afford you. How do you know that? I asked one guy, like, can you show me where my compensation expectations are on the resume? Because I don't remember putting it there. If I've applied to your role, especially if you're putting the salary in the job description, I'm not an idiot. I've decided that I can work with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have applied. Or what if, like so many of my friends, I was laid off from a FANG company? Guess what? Now I make $0. Guess whose comp expectations might have shifted just a bit? So recruiters have a responsibility to check those bullshit biases at the door. We also have a responsibility to consult. And remember, good consulting often looks like bad customer service. To consult with our hiring leaders and make sure that they understand, hey, we're not looking just at where this person was last week. We're looking at the sum total of their experiences. We're looking at the expertise in this tool. We're looking at the proven accomplishments in that field. Company name, company description, company size might give us some indicators of some things, but we still have to vet those things. Okay. Tenure bias. This is another one we see all the time, and especially with COVID. A lot of people got laid off more than once. A lot of people had to take short-term survival gigs, things like that. So how do you overcome tenure bias? If you have a recruiter or a hiring manager who's looking at your background and going, oh, this person had 5 jobs in 2 years. Like, oh, they never stay put, and there's a problem. Here's what I'm going to do if I'm that job seeker. I'm going to put a note on my resume. I'm going to have a little descriptor. I know a lot of resume writers and coaches, and I agree with this, recommend, maybe a quick little summary of what the company is. If it's a small company we've never heard of, that's fine. But also, why did the role end? 6-month contract. COVID-related layoffs. Company went out of business. That's okay. Put that explanation in that resume, next to your title or next to, the whatever little bullet point under your header, something, so that you're overcoming that bias before it even takes root. If you know that somebody is going to look at your resume and have questions, answer the questions ahead of time. Okay? That's what I would do. I'm not even kidding. And I've had to do that in the past. Like when I was in agency and I worked for companies that literally went out of business and moved around a lot. I don't think I was ever anywhere for more than about not even 3 years before Microsoft. I had very, very short tenures up until that point. And thank God Microsoft took a chance on me. I'm eternally grateful for that. Answer the questions before it becomes a question. So here's what I want you to do. I've got a million more examples. I could go all day and give you all the different data points and examples and all of that. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at your resume or have a trusted friend, colleague, recruiter, buddy, whatever. Look at your resume and ask them to be brutal. What would keep you from calling me? What red flags do you see? What concerns do you have? What questions do you want to ask about? And if they say, well, gosh, Amy, you've been with FANG all this time. Like, how are you going to convince a startup that you're good for the job? Got you. And start thinking about, how would I spin that? well, Amy, you've been out of work for 3 years. Like, you're trying to get back into, your field, and you haven't done it for a while. Like, how are you going to convince people? Got you. I'm going to focus on, training I've done, volunteer work I've had, relevant accomplishments in the field in my prior jobs, whatever. Get somebody that will be brutally honest with you about those potential gaps or concerns, so that way you can get ahead of it. This is one of those areas, y'all, where the toxic positivity bullshit makes me crazy. Because a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, if that company doesn't want you because you had 5 jobs in 2 years, that's their problem. You dodged a bullet. Maybe you did. Maybe you did. Maybe that company is a bunch of assholes. But dodging bullets ain't going to pay my mortgage. I got to get back to work, and I got to get back to work fast if I'm in that situation, right? Like, believe me, that shit keeps me up at night, okay? If I lost my job tomorrow, these videos will take a different turn, I'll tell you what. And so I do worry about that. And I do think about, exit plans and plan Bs and Cs and Ds and E's and needs and blah, 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 blah. I do. You should be too. And all the toxic positivity, don't you dare give people critical feedback, and how dare you. Shut up. We're dealing with real world problems over here on Recruiting in Yoga Pants, okay? You know what I'm saying? So understand, first of all, mapping your resume, your data points, your accomplishments, your experience to the needs of the role, matching it up to that job description is very important. I've talked about that in previous videos on resumes. And getting a critical, hard look, either looking at it yourself or asking a trusted friend or advisor to do it for you. Understanding and anticipating what questions might come up, what biases might block me, and address them. All right? I could keep going. I'm going to stop there. We're already over 10 minutes. So do let me know down below what questions you have about this. If there's a particular scenario that you're concerned about, leave a comment, send an email, amy@recruitinginyogapants.com. I will take a look as quickly as I can, try to give you a little bit more personalized one-to-one guidance here. But the best advice I have for you, again, make sure that your resume is telling your story effectively and leaves little to no doubt that you would be a fit for the role you're applying to. And don't be afraid to address those biases head on. Pretending it doesn't exist is not going to help us. By calling it out, saying, yep, you might look at this resume and see big companies. Well, let me tell you what, I've actually done small, scrappy startup shit, and here's how, is the key. All right, y'all. We'll see you next week.